Most people believe behavior is driven by motivation. That if they want something badly enough, they'll act accordingly. But motivation fluctuates constantly, while behavior often remains predictable. The reason is simple: environment exerts more influence than intention. Environment shapes what is easy, visible, and immediately available. It quietly nudges behavior without requiring conscious effort. When the environment supports an action, it happens more often. When it resists it, motivation has to fight uphill. This is why motivation feels unreliable. It's constantly working against surroundings that weren't designed to support the behavior in the first place. Behavior follows environment far more consistently than it follows desire. Most behavior is triggered by cues people don't notice. Objects in sight, sounds in the background, friction in the environment, and even room layout all signal what should happen next. These cues operate below conscious awareness, but they shape behavior continuously. When cues align with the desired behavior, consistency feels natural. When cues conflict, effort increases. Over time, the brain learns to respond automatically to what the environment presents. This is why changing intention rarely works on its own. The environment keeps sending the same signals, reinforcing the same responses. Until cues change, behavior usually doesn't. Friction determines which behaviors survive. When the right action requires effort, planning, or extra steps, it becomes easier to delay. When the wrong action is frictionless, it becomes the default. Most people add friction unintentionally. They make good behaviors harder than necessary and bad behaviors easier than they realize. Over time, this imbalance shapes habits without permission. Behavior isn't choosing what's best. It's choosing what's easiest. Strong systems remove friction from desired actions and add friction to unwanted ones. Weak systems do the opposite and then rely on discipline to compensate. Defaults shape behavior more than conscious choice. A default is simply what happens when no decision is made. What opens first? What stays visible? What is easiest to access? Over time, defaults repeat themselves without requiring effort or intention. Because defaults operate automatically, they don't ask for motivation or discipline. They quietly determine outcomes by removing the need to choose at all. This is why people often believe they are making decisions, when in reality they are following patterns that were already set. The system is running, even when attention is elsewhere. Changing behavior requires changing defaults, not fighting them. Until defaults shift, behavior remains predictable. Self-control fails most often in familiar environments. At home, behavior runs almost entirely on autopilot. The cues are familiar, the routines are ingrained, and attention is relaxed. That comfort lowers resistance, but it also lowers awareness of what's actually happening. Because the environment feels predictable, the brain conserves energy by repeating known patterns. There's less monitoring, less friction, and fewer interruptions to automatic behavior. This is why people can maintain discipline in structured settings, but struggle at home. The structure does the work elsewhere. At home, the environment quietly reinforces old habits without asking for permission. Expecting self-control to overpower a reinforcing environment is unrealistic. Over time, the environment always wins unless it is intentionally changed. Supportive environments don't happen by accident. They are designed. A supportive space makes the right behavior obvious, accessible, and easy to repeat. Tools are visible. Setup is minimal. The next step is clear without needing thought or motivation. This works because it removes friction before it becomes a problem. When effort is required just to begin, behavior stalls. When effort is reduced, repetition increases naturally. Design doesn't need to be dramatic. Small changes, placing tools within reach, removing extra steps, reducing setup time, can shift behavior more than motivation ever could. When the environment supports the action, discipline becomes unnecessary. The system does the work quietly, and consistency follows. Many environments resist behavior quietly. Clutter, distraction, poor layout, and unnecessary steps create friction that builds over time. None of it feels dramatic, but together it drains energy before action even begins. When resistance is subtle, people misdiagnose the problem. They assume motivation is low, when in reality the environment is doing the discouraging. Silent resistance shows up as hesitation, delay, or avoidance. The task feels heavier than it should, even when the intention is strong. Removing resistance doesn't require adding effort. It requires subtraction. Fewer steps. Clearer access. Less setup. Less cleanup. When resistance is removed, behavior feels lighter without changing the goal. Consistency improves not because you tried harder, but because the system stopped pushing back. Behavior rarely changes through dramatic overhauls. It changes through small, deliberate environmental shifts. Moving an object. Changing what's visible. Reducing the number of steps required to begin. These shifts work because they alter what happens automatically. They don't rely on motivation showing up. They change the default experience instead. When small adjustments are made in the right places, effort drops immediately. The brain no longer has to negotiate, plan, or push through resistance just to start. Over time, these minor changes compound. What once required discipline begins to feel natural, simply because the environment stopped getting in the way. Consistency improves not because ambition increased, but because friction decreased. Small changes, applied intentionally, outperform big intentions that have to be renewed every day. Behavior doesn't follow motivation. It follows design. When environments are aligned with goals, consistency becomes stable. When they aren't, discipline feels exhausting, no matter how strong intentions are. This is why lasting change rarely comes from trying harder. It comes from reshaping the conditions that quietly guide behavior every day. When the environment supports progress, action feels natural. When resistance is removed, effort drops. When defaults are aligned, behavior repeats without negotiation. Over time, discipline fades into the background, not because it disappeared, but because it's no longer required. Consistency becomes a byproduct of structure. Not force. Not self-control. Design. That's what makes behavior stick, systems that hold, even when motivation doesn't.